Hello and welcome to the second video in the series of videos relating to Module 5, which focuses on design thinking. And I sincerely appreciate you taking the time to view these particular videos. This particular video, 5.2, examines investigating and defining. In this particular video on investigating and defining, I'd like to encourage you to continue to draw upon your design thinking approaches. We'll examine the digital technology sequence of content F to 10. We'll discuss defining and decomposing real-world problems, and I'll conclude this video with a final word. So as I pointed out earlier, Jason has included the glossary in the course introduction and developing that shared language and understanding among staff in a particular school, across the school system, with our students, with our parents and caregivers, is critically important, and if in doubt, refer to the glossary. So in terms of investigating and defining, note that the process of defining, designing, implementing and evaluating all combine to form a four-stage process to create digital solutions. So you can see that defining is one stage of that four-stage process. And it involves students analysing problems by describing problems in simpler terms and breaking them down into smaller parts. And this is a strategy that Jason's referred to in computational thinking and elsewhere. So continue to draw upon and develop your thoughts about design thinking processes. We provided some in section 5.1 resources. For example, there was the AITSL document referred to, and on page 14 of that, it's got some excellent resources that you might like to visit and engage with as well. But in that particular document, it provided one particular approach of learning through doing and introducing you to a design thinking approach. We've also provided in those resources the Institute of Design at Stanford and the D-School, Stanford D-School approach. And you would have, if you've taken a close look at that, you'll notice that they've got a five-stage process. Whichever approach you looked at, you'll probably find investigating and defining expressed in some form within those design thinking approaches. So in the Stanford Institute of Design model, define is there in the second step of that five basic step approach. Another model that was referred to in the resources was the Challenge-Based Learning Framework, or CBL, which has been developed by Apple. And you'll notice there it starts with a big idea, the essential questions and the challenge, which in many ways is the way in which this particular approach, the CBL framework, goes about investigating and designing the big idea, the essential questions and the challenge. So how does this look in terms of sequence of content from foundation to year 10? And this is where I'd like you to try to make sense of investigating and defining in relation to your particular learning and teaching context. If you're teaching prep, year 1, year 2, or through to year 9 and 10. Note that as you go through the expectations from foundation to 10 in investigating and defining, there's an increasing sophistication in the extent to which our students are expected to specify a problem. And starting with foundation to 2, there's no expectation for students to actually be able to define a problem. And as you go through this, please, this is where you can make a great deal of sense and draw upon the wonderful, excellent work that Jason's presented on strategic thinking, futures thinking, systems thinking, computational thinking, and also this module on design thinking. So the sequence of content, foundation to 10, looking at the foundation to 2, students there are expected to follow, describe and represent a sequence of steps and decisions. They're algorithms needed to solve simple problems. While there's no expectation for students to define a problem, what they're developing here is the ability to identify and describe and represent a sequence of steps, and to do some decision making about that particular sequence of steps. At the other end of the continuum in years 9 and 10, you'll see there that the expectation is increasingly sophisticated in students being expected to define and decompose real-world problems precisely, taking into account functional and non-functional requirements and including stakeholders to identify needs. And at this particular level, students understand that they might not have all of the information they need, and this will include interviewing stakeholders for more information. So at that level where we're moving up and requiring students beyond Foundation 2 to define and decompose real-world problems. Decompose requires students to separate a complex problem into parts to allow that problem to be more easily understood. And it may be represented visually in diagrams, for example. This differs from deconstructing, which is the process of dismantling or pulling a product or system apart to systematically identify and analyse the components and their relationships. So let's look at an example, and I've drawn upon this example from Digital Learning and Teaching Victoria, and they've got some really great infographics in a series called Cut Through the Technical Language of Digital Technologies. And often cutting through and getting to the real heart of what's needed to be understood is a skill, and I value these particular resources to draw upon. So the example I've got here, sitting between F2 and 910, is the Year 7-8 content description to define and decompose real-world problems, taking into account functional requirements and economic, environmental, social, technical and usability constraints. And please note that this particular statement of identifying problems that can be decomposed in some elements, for example, creating a decision tree. We're also developing general capabilities of literacy, ICT capability, and critical and creative thinking. So here, carrying on, here's the example of decomposition. So the task is interest in a newsletter is declining. The readers want a publication that's engaging and interactive, but there are time and budgetary constraints. Kim, who produced the newsletter, uses word processing software to create the newsletter. Identify and classify the constraints on the solution of this problem. So moving forward, the graphic which is provided in that particular resource shows how this can be decomposed from the newsletter into requirements and constraints. And we know that the requirements of the newsletter was that it needed to be interactive and engaging. The constraints, which was central to the task, to identify those constraints and decompose them. They can be separated as being technical and economic. This is one way of decomposing constraints. And the technical can be broken down further into smaller parts of skills and software and time and budget. Now, your students might, for example, develop a different way of representing that, and they might have different ideas. They might have other layers that they can break it down even further. There might be some key elements that are missed in this particular model. So in my final word, again, please refer to the resources. The highly recommended resource is the Digital Technologies Hub. Tremendous resource in there, and in particular the complementary video to the work that I've discussed here is excellent in video 4, Creating Digital Solutions, Investigating and Defining, presented again by Associate Professor James Curran. It's in language that we can understand, and importantly, it's language we need to internalise in order to effectively implement the digital technologies subject area. There's again some brief activities, and we're leading up. There will be some questions related to this particular topic in the 24-item quiz. If you've listened to this particular video, work through the activities, I'm sure that you're going to master that quiz. And I'll just reiterate, there is an activity within Module 5 that asks you to share your wisdom and advice to other teachers through a practical example that you've used with your year levels in terms of a design thinking summary outlining the resources that you used and your wisdom and advice for other teachers about why it worked, what were the secrets to success. I look forward to working with you right throughout this module, and I hope that you'll look at the third video which follows this particular video. Thank you so much.